In this series of videos, I'm going to be talking about a new model of obesity. It's a model which I believe makes a lot more sense of the science and of everybody's experience. In fact, every study that I read is confirming that this is the model, and I will be arguing that this model explains why so many different types of diet do help to reverse obesity and associated poor health. Diets which are completely opposite to each other, like high carb, low fat, also carnivore, fasting. I mean, a lot of these diets are extremely opposite from each other, but they all work to reverse obesity. Some better than others, depending on the individual. Because if it was an insulin or a blood glucose thing, then the sugar diet wouldn't work. The low-fat plant-based diets wouldn't work because they do have higher blood sugar levels and they do have insulin spikes. So if it was all about that, then these other diets wouldn't work. And I'm here to explain a new model which does make sense, which does work, and which does explain why all these different types of diet can all be effective. Okay, and sneak peek, it's all to do with events in the gut. It's not to do with events in the blood, insulin spikes, glucose spikes. It's to do with events in the gut. So let's get started. Let's dive in. Let's just have a quick look at just one of the mountain of studies which demonstrate how important the gut microbiome is in the development and treatment of obesity. This study took the gut microbiome of lean, healthy, exercised mice and transplanted it into the gut of an obese mouse. The obese mice receiving the gut bacteria transplant from the diet and exercised lean, healthy mice showed remarkably reduced ability to absorb food and greatly improved symptoms of obesity and health. The researchers concluded, our findings demonstrate that the beneficial effects of diet and exercise are transmissible via fecal microbiome transplant, suggesting a potential therapeutic treatment for obesity. They are saying that it is the diet and exercise-induced changes to the gut microbiome that are responsible for the beneficial effects of diet and exercise to reverse obesity and poor health. However, this may seem confusing to you. You've seen all the science, you've read all the articles, and you're convinced the gut is the most important thing when it comes to obesity and poor health. But in your own experience, when you've tried all the strategies that have been offered to you by gut health scientists, you know from your own experience that they haven't been very effective. They haven't actually done a lot to really reverse your obesity and improve your health. So the normal recommendations for improving gut health have been increasing probiotics, fermented food, increasing fibre and polyphenols, like adding things to your diet. And the fact that you haven't seen very big effects from doing that has probably led you to shrug off the whole idea of the gut as being very important at all, even though the science is convincing. In contrast, the strategies which have helped you to lose significant amounts of weight are the dietary restriction strategies. They're the strategies where you are restricting either one or two of the macronutrients. So that is restricting either carbohydrates, protein, or fat. You either have the low-carb diets, which restrict dietary carbs, the low-fat diets, which restrict dietary fat, or plant-based diets, which restrict animal proteins, and ketogenic diets, which restrict carbs and limit protein, and intermittent fasting, which restrict all of them during the fasting period. And these are the strategies where you have actually seen really good results in terms of reversing your obesity and reversing your poor health. So this is a bit confusing. The science is all pointing to the gut as being the most important thing for obesity and poor health. But the strategies we've been given by the gut scientists aren't that effective, and the strategies that do work are things which, as far as we're aware, don't really do much for gut health. Well, this is what these videos are going to explain. Intermittent fasting, low-carb diets, low-fat diets, whole food, plant-based diets, and they all help to reverse obesity and poor health because they correct faulty events in the gut. It is faulty events in the gut, including the gut microbiome, that cause obesity and poor health. And I will argue the dietary restriction strategies are actually the best way to correct those faulty events in the gut. And that this model makes a lot more sense of the science and all our observations than the outdated, debunked ideas, which are still being perpetuated by online diet gurus, who really don't know how those diets work and have therefore just been sort of guessing. i.e., I'm talking about the carb insulin theory, the insulin resistance theory, the glucose spike theory, and the intramyocellular fat storage theory. I'm going to argue that these theories don't make sense of everything, and the theory that does make sense of everything we can see and everything in the science is the theory that these diets work by correcting faulty events in the gut. Basically, what has happened is people didn't really know how these diets worked, so they have looked at the symptoms that occur alongside obesity and mistakenly thought that those symptoms, because they always occur alongside obesity, are maybe causing the obesity, where in actual fact they are both symptoms of the real underlying problem, which is faulty events in the gut. So, for example, the faulty events in the gut increase insulin resistance, they increase glucose and insulin spikes, and they cause obesity. So they occur alongside each other. But the insulin spikes and the glucose spikes and the intramyocellular fat storage do not cause the obesity. They're just occurring alongside the obesity. You can think of it as similar to when someone has the flu. The symptoms of the flu are fever, runny nose, cough, aches and pains. So if you didn't know that the true cause of the flu was the flu virus, you might start just trying to guess, because you might notice that the fever always occurs alongside the cough. So you might guess that the fever is causing the cough, but the fever isn't causing the cough. They're both symptoms which occur at the same time due to the real root of the problem, which is the flu virus. So it's important to really understand what is the true cause of all the symptoms, rather than getting confused and thinking that one symptom is the cause of another symptom. Now, before I explain how intermittent fasting, low-carb diets, low-fat diets, plant-based diets correct the faulty events in the gut, you need to understand what those faulty events actually are. If you would like to know what those faulty events in the gut are that are responsible for obesity and poor health, and which we correct when we do these particular carnivore diets, low-fat diets, fasting, etc., you need to understand about leptin resistance, because when we correct the events in the gut, we are actually correcting leptin resistance, which is actually the root cause of obesity. So you need to understand about leptin resistance first. So to learn about that, click the screen, or it's also linked in the description below the video. Hopefully see you in the next one.